Today we are talking about the current top 5 junglers in Smite, plus those who didn't quite make the list. In that context, we will also be talking about builds for those junglers, so if you want to play them, you will be ready to do so. And it's very interesting what kind of guards we have there at the moment and how much competition there's going on and how little competition there's going on at the same time. You have to keep in mind that these are the guards that will be the most valued one at Worlds as well. So we can kind of see a pattern across the split already, and actually a lot of the guards that were good at the start of the split are still pretty good. There are obviously some changes as well. But what you can expect is that these guards will stay good for a while now, that we're not getting any more major buffs or nerfs before Worlds as well. So you will see these in your games quite a bit until after Worlds and during Worlds obviously. Before we go into the actual top 5, let's talk about the guards that didn't quite make the cut. There are a lot of junglers that have been played a few times across the split that have had some value in the pro scene as niche picks, at counter picks, sometimes, 1 pick, 2 pick, 3 picks, 4 picks, up to roughly 8 picks. And they are often performing very well when they are picked. So for that niche, they're often good. They maybe have 1 pick and 100% win rate, but those are obviously not the guards that are necessarily the highest valued and strongest overall. They just work well in one particular situation. For example, Daji has a 75% win rate, but he was also only picked 4 times. Or Thor has a 67% win rate, but he was also only picked 3 times. Both of these guards offer a decent amount of control, and I would not be surprised at all if we see them at Worlds as well. It's just that often other guards are more valued because they do the job a little bit better. But at least for Thor, we should also keep in mind that he was recently buffed, so he may see some more picks in general. Along with that, we also have to keep in mind that some of the pro teams have probably kept some of their strats secret for now, and some of the picks just weren't really picked yet to not show the strategy for Worlds. That may even counter the top 5 picks. Spot number 5 on the top 5 is already highly contested though. There are 3 guards that really go into a race here, and only one can quite make it. The guards in question are Ravan, Ratatoskr and Hunbatz. Now Hunbatz was picked a total of 17 times, and he had also 6 bans on top of that. What he didn't bring was the wins. He's a valued pick, he brings a lot of control, he is good in a team setting that needs that kind of control, and he has that late game, but his win rate was only 24% with 4 wins. So as much as I'd like to put him on the top 5, he just hasn't shown the performance to really be there. He's definitely a strong pick and, again, a valued pick, but just not quite good enough. Besides, the other picks are just even more valued. One of them is valued so much that he actually got a fair bit of a nerf to the ultimate, being Ratatoskr. He just offered a little bit too much control. And he is definitely still a good pick, but he doesn't quite have the win rate either. He's got 11 wins, being a 41% win rate for him, even though he has those 28 bans. But right now, there's one guard that does it a little bit better, and that's Ravan. Ravan has a 45% win rate, so not extremely higher, but still a little bit more, 24 bans and 9 wins. So he has been picked a little bit less than Ratatoskr, but on the other hand, he also didn't have a nerf to the same degree as Ratatoskr did. Ravan is interesting in the sense that he is a guard that used to be primarily played with very tanky builds. He used to be a warrior that was played in jungle, but still used a lot of those bruiser items. Since his stats have shifted, we see a very different approach to Ravan. He is now quite frequently built with a higher focus on purely damage-oriented items. You can still see the occasional bruiser item in between or the occasional defense item because they still work for him, but really he is much more about his pure ability burst at this point than he is about soaking up a lot of stuff in the backline. He just brings an immense amount of pressure, especially in early game, and that is something that he is picked for mostly. Sure, he still gets a little bit of damage mitigation during his ultimate, but that is kind of secondary to just bursting a target down. And I think it's very interesting to see this shift. And no pun intended, Shifter's Shield actually became one of the most valued items on him, giving him that little bit of extra survivability in combination with a lot of extra damage. You'll typically not see more defense items than Shifter's Shield and Mage's Blessing, though the occasional Mantle of Discord or Spirit Robe obviously is thrown in here and there. When Ravan was changed, many people actually didn't quite know how to play him or how to work with him, and I was definitely one of them as well. What we can tell now is that in the current meta, a lot of high pressure junglers are very strong in general, very fast clear is very valued, and Ravan just brings exactly that, and that's where he shines, so he fits right in with the others. I will propose a build for him here, and as always, this should be very important to note, this is just a base build. At the moment we have a lot of good items for junglers that can be swapped out, and generally jungler builds are rather flexible, especially towards the end, and you always want to make sure to counter opponents. So for example, if you want to have a Brawler's Beat Stick for anti-heal, or if it's in any way useful for your team, then you should get it, and you should trade out one of your other pen items for it. So this is, so to speak, just a skeleton to work with on what you are building on the character. In Ravan's case, this is Assassin's Blessing, Crusher, then a Warrior Tabai, and obviously you finish your boots before you finish your first item. You just start with a part of the first item. Crusher obviously very strong because of the extra tick damage, and Ravan having so many spammable abilities to proc it regularly, and also the little bit of extra attack speed that really helps Ravan, who slows down enemies and does a lot of damage with his basic attacks in between. Then Shifter's Shield as his power tanky item, Brawler's Beat Stick for anti-heal, obviously otherwise you can go something like Jotun's. You can even consider Hydra's Lament on him, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it in this particular build anymore. Then Magi's Blessing, and then if you get to late game, you want to get a Titan's Bane. And now we get to the next high pressure, high clear god, and that is Pele. Pele is still kind of a questionable god in her position. We still haven't quite figured out how she's performing, and a lot of the games that she was played in were actually by United, who simply stomp their opposition. So this is not quite representative of how she would be for everyone, but overall right now she is on 10 wins and a 67% win rate, so we should give her that credit for now, and 26 bans are nothing to scoff at after all either. With Pele you have very good base values, you have cheap clear, and you have high early aggression to work with, even more so now that she got her change to the abilities and the ultimate. She will be a killing machine in early game, has a lot of aggression potential, and then in the later stages she becomes a little bit harder to play. But this is kind of circumvented by the build that's typically ran on her, and one of those builds is what I'm going to propose here. And that starts with Assassin's Blessing, into Gladiator Shield for a little bit of early tankiness and sustain, into Warrior Tabai, then Soul Eater for even more sustain, Void Shield for even more tankiness and survivability along with some extra damage, and Seele for even more bruiser stats, some bit more magical defense and a little bit more power, Magi's Blessing, and then trade out your Gladiator Shield for Shifter's Shield. With this, you will not have immense amounts of penetration or immense amounts of damage, but you are super survivable. If that's not your style, I also made a new Pele guide very recently, and you can very much go for more aggressive build choices as well. You can find them all there, including Transcendence, including pen builds. It all works very well for her, depending on what situation you're in, but I think this one helps transition very well into late game and still have a lot of relevance. The number 3 right now is Naja. Naja is interesting because he got all these changes to the character. He was extremely strong at the start of the split, and he's fallen off a little bit since, but he's actually still picked a lot and he's actually still performing well, so we still have to give him that credit of being a very good pick. An overall of 26 wins, 62 bans, and a 62% win rate still speak for themselves as well. Now, with Naja, you are once again in a situation where you have very high pressure, have very high clear, high early aggression, and you can isolate a single target very well. What you want to do with them most of the time is be a little bit tanky as well, because that way, while you may not be able to destroy someone as effectively in your ultimate, there's also a good chance you will survive after the ultimate. Tie that with his high mobility and your build could look something like this. Assassin's Blessing into Jotun's Wrath for cooldown reduction to use your abilities a lot more, to Warrior Tabai, Gladiator Shield for more survivability, and Seele for the same and also cooldown reduction here, and then Brawlers for more anti-heal, and then Magi's Blessing. That would be a rather aggressive build still, but still having a little bit of defense here and there. But you could also go completely crazy. For example, Scream, I think, did a build where he included Masamune, Shield of Regrowth, and Witchblade, as well as Rangda's Mask, and then had his boots sold at the end of the game in order to have that high movement speed that way, get even more movement speed through Shield of Regrowth and be super fast while also still doing okay amounts of damage. So really, Naja's build are probably the most flexible ones out there, and you can build them differently in every single game. I can't tell you more than that here. Number 2 is Cirquette, and if it wasn't for one guard change, for an item change, she would be number 1. 21 wins, 57% win rate, 57 bans, and different from Naja, she also didn't get nerfed throughout the split, so she's just really good in any way. It's just almost impossible to get her out of the meta as long as anti-heal is so valued and as long as a true damage remains on her ultimate as well as percentage damage, which means she can kind of fight into almost anyone in almost any situation to some degree at least. Her build will look something like this: Assassin's Blessing into Jolt's Wrath for cooldown reduction, Warrior Tabai, Brawler Speed Stick, or if you really want to, you could, I guess, go Crusher here as well, but Brawlers is what you want most of the time. Masamune for some survivability, Titan's Bane for some more damage, and Mantle of Discord for more survivability. Once again, in this situation, you can also swap out a lot of items for more health, more tankiness in other ways, depending on what you're going to go for. I've seen people go as crazy as Blackthorn Hammer, and I think even that can be absolutely justified in the context of her stats. And that brings us to the number 1, who should not really surprise anyone at this point, because that buff, and that buff. Golden Blade Mercury. I don't even know if I should put the item here or the god. You have a god that now has 20 wins, a 63% win rate, and 27 bans, but basically only showed up in the last few weeks. And he just does it all because he clears super fast with his 1. He has a super strong clear with his 2 as well, as long as he has Golden Blade, because he just needs to hit the big camp and she just runs around the jungle and just clears everything super quick, and then has a strong gank potential and a very strong late game as well. You get a little bit of a nerf, but honestly that cooldown won't matter that much because that's not where most of his damage output comes from. And for his clear, again, you can also use his 2 very easily. You just have to walk a little bit further. As a build, or pretty much the build, because that's what everyone is running, except for maybe Captain Twig, Assassin's Blessing, Golden Blade, Warrior Tabai or Talaria, depending on which one you prefer, and depending on the situation, Rage into Deathbringer, and then if that game even goes that long, you can go Magi's Blessing, or maybe Asi, depending on how much survivability you want, of what kind, and then Titan's Bane, if you ever get there. You can also trade out Golden Blade in very late game, but really, the game should be over at that point, you're playing Mercury. As you can tell by the background footage, I don't even have new footage from Mercury anymore because it's just not interesting to play him right now because he's just too good. It's just not a challenge at all. If you want to farm wins, go for Mercury. But if you want to actually practice the game, I think play another god until he's a little more nerfed. And that's it for the top 5. I hope this gave you a good overview and this was interesting and insightful. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. And also thanks to those of you who have been supporting Teets in the last few weeks. She is now on the time point where she can apply for partnership, and you guys have been helping with that a lot, so I very much appreciate that. Again, thanks a lot, and see you for the next one later, because we're doing a Fallout video today as well. DukeSloth, out.